All right, so now we're going to talk about the something that is generally accepted in the bigger narrative about Christopher Hitchens, something that I actually somewhat disagree with, and the main purpose that I made this video, or I came up with this idea, that Hitchens was a left-wing writer, or thinker, intellectual, whatever you want to call it, and then following a series of events, he completely moves to the right, right? I already mentioned that there were already signals or already things in his writing that didn't uh, he never fit in perfectly with the image of a leftist. Especially, first of all, his style was very angry and very direct and aggressive. So his style was not this soft lefty that came out of 60s. He was very much opposite of that. And he had this sort of a Fleet Street look about him, in that he wore suits and always smoked and drank and all that. So he never fit that image of the leftist. He had a soft spot for certain writers that would be described as right wing, and he supported certain activities of British Empire and all that. So there were always signals that he's not that perfect image of a lefty that is described in a Wikipedia entry or something, right? Then you have certain events happening, which one of major one is the Rushdie affair. You have a fatwa issued by Ayatollah Khomeini against Salman Rushdie because of a book he writes, and in that event, and he's a close friend of Salman Rushdie and Martin Amis and all that, and that event is one of the events that he I think even in an
Sorry, I'm
interview
really
said,
not familiar with Salman Rushdie and all this, so just bear
oh,
that in mind.
he wrote a book that Muslims found extremely offensive,
Who
and
is this? Is a person who's like really famous, who's still alive? Sorry, apologize for my
oh
ignorance.
yeah, no, no, so, yeah, I thought he's very much alive, and he does a lot of interviews. Salman Rushdie is a very, very famous British novelist. His most famous book is Midnight Children, and it's a good book, but not bad anyway. But he's the book he wrote, the Satanic Verses, very famous book that Ayatollah Khomeini, the leader of Iran, issued a fatwa against and called for his death. Although it was not a legal um, edict, but it was more of a ideological thing or whatever, and that led to Salman. I think one of his publishers got killed in Japan, if I'm not mistaken. His books got burnt all over Pakistan, India, a lot of Muslim
Okay,
countries.
really not familiar with that.
He had to go. Yeah, he had to. His marriage collapsed due to he had to go into hiding basically in the UK because
Yeah.
they were under threat of a
His
terrorist attack,
face
and
is
that
familiar right now. I'm looking at him, so his face is
he's he
familiar,
does
but
he goes on Bill Maher show a lot. He goes on a lot of to be honest, he's also somebody he's been sadly boxed into this right wing. Again, this is my view of Hitchens, that they are not really that much right wing, or Salman Rushdie, but they've been boxed into it by there is this general perspective that they are very right wing. I don't think they are. But yeah, he's more of a novelist though. He's a literary figure, Salman Rushdie, not a political figure. But that Rushdie affair sort of ignites this thing in Hitchens, that religion uh, uh, is a force for evil. He famously writes a book that religion poisons everything, and uh, that event. Then you have the Yugoslavia, collapse of Yugoslavia, and there he finds himself more agreeing with people who are pushing for intervention to prevent genocide of Muslims. Because there was a genocide was going on, and he, as I mentioned in an earlier segment of the videos, he saw it as, I don't care about the stability of a undemocratic fascistic regimes, and they should be undermined. So you have that event, and then uh, you have then later on you have 9/11, which I think cements this idea in his head that religion and certain strains of Islam and Christianity and Judaism are the most like wild ideologies out there, and he should be like fighting them heavily on. And that seems to be because he was that's why he supports the war on terrorism and the invasion of Afghanistan and invasion of Iraq. I mean, Taliban is a they are religious fanatics clearly, and he again, as I mentioned in an earlier video, or if you're watching this as part of the larger video, he viewed whatever, like he knew the faults of American government. He was very critical of them and stuff, but he viewed them, whatever they are, as better than Taliban or Saddam. Kind of just the same way he viewed British Empire as better than the Mughal Empire, for example, or Roman Empire better than the British warlords or local warlords that were ruling Britain before the Roman conquest, right? So I don't think, as it has been suggested, he moved to the right. I think what happened was in his last interview with Jeremy Paxman, he says that there is no international left anymore. There is no Trotskyan movement. As there is nobody pushing for that in a real way. Of course, there are all these grassroots movements or these people talking like us, to be honest, in our own echo chamber in many ways. But in reality, there is no international left movement. So I think what he was more of an internationalist than a leftist. So I think that's why he supported war on terrorism and all those things, rather than being anti-Muslim or being, imperialist in a very simple sense, that, oh, we're gonna go and spread our values all over the world. He believed that, I mean, in a way, he did believe the values were better, but also I think he believed the capabilities were more, and I think he believed that the outcome, sadly, he didn't survive to see the rise of ISIS and all this, but I would have been interested to see if after ISIS he may have changed his mind, because
But even before ISIS, a lot of people had already seen what had become and the atrocities, and there was like a lot of evidence on the anti-war side already, even pre-ISIS. I mean, that was like the cherry on
sure,
top of the
sure,
cake.
but I would say that in a way, if you want to be realistic at things, Japanese and Germans and Chinese, all these countries that have reached development, Europeans after World War II, the period, there is a construction period where a lot of shit can go wrong, right? And I think you can be fair about even an invasion and give an invading force, let's say 5 to 10 years to sort shit out. I think if you want to be realistic about, no, there has never been a perfect
Sure.
revolution or a perfect invasion. But I think if you want to be realistic and go on a case by case basis, rather than just saying invasions are always bad, if you want to go, like if America had actually invested in Iraq, if they had planned the invasion, if they had not disbanded like all the military personnel and basically allowing economic collapse and allowing everybody to fall into poverty and putting into place a highly fragile political system. So I think you could you could give them 5 to 10 years, but now I think after pretty much how many years it's been since 2003 they went into Iraq. So after I think 17 years or 18 years, it's more than enough now to say definitely it was a failure, and it only helped to destabilize the region. But I think at the time it was harder to predict, and even 5 years after the war you could still hope for, because there were signs both in Afghanistan and in Iraq that you were seeing a pluralistic society in some ways, with, let's say, women's rights in Afghanistan was improving, freedom of speech was coming to Iraq, Shia minority was getting some breathing space. So there were positive signs in the beginning as well, but then situation deteriorated so badly that I wish he was alive to see would he continue to defend
Yeah, I
his
mean, that was a
support.
kind interpretation what you gave, and And it is somewhat agree, somewhat a kind interpretation, though I would say, but yeah.
Because to be honest, I am still, if I would still say that I hope somebody would have invaded Iraq and removed Saddam, but I just hoped it would have been done with better intentions by like
The key word intention is good there too, like Jeff, genuine
and
intentions.
not genuine intention of, by the way, good, like making Iraq better for Iraqi people or some la-di-da thing like that.
No, but
Just
that's
like,
kind of
okay,
what I mean. Like if you have
we're gonna do
genuine.
no, I don't think nobody has that intention ever in politics, I think. But
Yeah,
at
that
least
is
some
true.
people have intention of state building, and some people have intention of, okay, we're going to just create chaos to sell more weapons. And I think I didn't have enough knowledge, but I'm surprised that Hitchens didn't have enough knowledge about the Bush family and the Cheney family and the connections to, yes, that's, yeah, they are not coming into a state build. They're coming into wreck, if anything, they're wrecking crew. They're not this is not Marshall Plan. This
Yeah.
is opposite, But yeah, so I disagree that basically a lot of people argue these events slowly moved him to the right, and some people are even go further and say that he was just cynically trying to pander to an audience or something. But I think if you especially watch his last interview, and if you look at his whole career, he was very much an internationalist, and that was even above his sort of leftist views. And he was like freedom of speech, that type of thing. He really had certain first principles that he really believed in, and he never compromised on. And he may have had a strange definition of those values, but I think he was very consistent with them, whatever you want to say.
Okay. Yeah, so what else is there on him worth mentioning, talking about?
Well, to be honest, in his move to the right, that was the thing I wanted to refer to. I suggest everybody check out I think his worst interview, to be honest, just to be critical a bit. His worst interview is the one with. I think he does an interview with Bill Maher, actually, in which Bill Maher is criticizing the George Bush, and he says, "Oh, you're implying that George Bush is blah blah blah." I mean, that was, I think, his worst moment. That he goes as far as defending a Bush, but I think, in my view, he really backs off of that later on. He doesn't really do that as much. But, make up your own mind. Was it a move to the right, a cynical move, or was it always a different way of viewing leftist values? I think it's the latter, but, make up your own mind. And definitely read the book called Unhitched by Richard Seymour. I think if you want to, obviously read Christopher Hitchens' own books for his own views, but if you want a criticism, like a good faith critique of him, I think Richard Seymour does a good job.
So what are what are his own books that you would recommend, just like a few of them, and also the name of this book that's critical of him?
I'll get into that in a bit, I think.
Okay.
Let's do that. Yeah, I'm going to do a whole thing about his books and books surrounding him.
All right. But, and since we're on the whole Iraq war kind of shenanigan, is it the right time to just briefly talk about his weird waterboarding video?
Yeah, I think so. That's the perfect time.
What was that all about?
If you experience unbearable stress, as soon as you release one or both, this exercise and demonstration can begin to be you understand. Yes, sir. You have a code word that you use for distress. That right? Are you breathing? Relax. We're going to get this
It's a smothering feeling as well as a drowning feeling. They told me that when I activated the dead man's handle, which is a simple process, you simply release something, you let it go. I didn't do that. I practically, even though my hands were bound, I sort of, as near as you could, I threw the thing out of my hand. I mean, I really wanted it to stop. And I could swear I shouted the code word, but I hadn't remembered to do anything like that.
That's one of the, like, at the time when I was young.
You had a good explanation, though. You had a good explanation as to why he did that.
Yeah, well, when I was young, first of all, let's say that I was very impressed because, again, I was one of.
So explain to people what happens, what the video is all about.
Let's start from he does this thing, I think, with Fox News Corporation. I think they arrange it or something that he comes on their show later. He does it for Vanity Fair.
Yeah, Vanity Fair. I was gonna say. Apparently, it's the editor who asked him to do it.
Yeah. He. There was this whole thing that the U.S. government, they tried to. I'm watching this TV show, by the way, called Rake, and they just had an episode about that Australian TV show. Highly recommended to everyone. That they changed the language in a way to justify certain actions. War on terrorism is a famous one. Everybody knows about. What is terrorism? How do you find it? Where is it? A very vague language. So George Bush's government started calling waterboarding enhanced interrogation techniques, right? So they're not torturing people, they're just interrogating them very sophisticatedly. And Christopher Hitchens was a supporter of Iraq War, right? So he said that I'm not going to support every aspect of it for no reason or whatever. And there was a big debate. Cheney was saying that this is enhanced interrogation. Dick Cheney was saying it's not torture. And Hitchens said, all right, I'm supporting these people. So he went on and he actually got waterboarded. And then after that, he came out and wrote an article saying that, yeah, it's definitely torture. And it's basically they're using physical force to get information or whatever out of you, get you to talk. So, yeah, it's definitely torture. At the time, I felt very impressed by it. And I really applauded him. And I would say that he did it to prove this point. He did it to prove that it's torture. It's not enhanced interrogation. And there was a video of it, and I think it was a very great publicity move for an anti-torture movement, that if there is such a movement or whatever, which I'm very much anti-torture, besides the fact that it's evil or whatever, morality is a very subjective thing. I do think it's fucking stupid because the information is extremely unreliable, because somebody
That's
like
my
me.
other issue with the video. Yeah. Like, the video misses the point about at least the other argument about torture, which is that just because you're torturing someone, you're not gonna get the exact truth or whatever the answer it is. Maybe this person doesn't know, so it completely misses that point. Too, and just
At the time, because of 9/11 and because of many other things, because of 9/11, because of right-wing media, basically, there was this narrative of what was it called? It had a good name. Oh, ticking bomb scenario. That what would you do if there is a ticking bomb scenario? That there is a bomb, let's say in London, in a stadium, and it's about to go off. And would you torture? And this man knows the combination to disarm this bomb. And would you torture? So they would put you in a scenario that you have to say, oh, okay, whatever. What I mean? Like,
right-wingers don't know this, but some of them would make really good philosophers because they only deal in hypotheticals like what if, and you're pushing you to the extreme situation.
Yeah, exactly. They don't want to talk about real life scenarios or real life scenarios,
which is something Sam Harris does a lot too when he talks about politics. He just replaces it with a hypothetical example scenario.
That's why he's not very good at it. He should stick to philosophy and neuroscience and shouldn't really. Yeah, I agree completely. Although again, I know how arrogant I sound. dismissing a man with twice my age, 3 times my level of education, and far more output than I have. But that's my view.
But yeah, but the waterboarding video kills me. And of course,
Yeah,
Hitchens, after 2 seconds, I mean, just if someone puts a towel over your face like that and he's tied down and they put a few drops of water, and of course, he can't stand it.
And by the way,
They pour a
waterboarding
little bit. It's like a split second, kind of. I don't know.
Yeah, but for people who don't know, waterboarding stimulates the feeling of drowning because it's basically your water goes to your lungs, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think he knew. I think again, this goes back to his showman sort of personality, which he shares.
That's the only thing that explained it to me. Like when you said that, I was like, okay. I mean, he's so committed to maybe to that aspect.
Yeah. And I do think it helped a lot of. It helped to clarify that it is fucking torture to a lot of. I know I'm excusing him because I always
guess more good came out of bad. More good probably came out of bad. Yeah, sure. I mean, if he's willing to do that.
Because in our videos, I always say that if you don't understand this or if you don't understand this politician is lying, like you're an idiot or whatever, or you're beyond, you're too far gone beyond, But yeah, I think he did it more for publicity. I don't think you need to do like I need to have my nail removed to understand if it's torture or if it's just some kind of enhanced manicure, So,
and like I said, he also missed half the point about the whole debate around torture too. At least in the video, they never talk about that. I recently listened to the video. They never mentioned to the whole other debate about the effectiveness.
Because another thing is that dimension is not as popular because people don't,
Really, from what I recall, that was a major part. I mean, I got into politics around 2010, 11, so maybe this was a bit later than that. But from what I recall, that was a major topic of discussion around waterboarding too, that not only is it torture, but that torture is also not effective. We've been over this so many times, and
I think, I agree. I would say it was major, but not as major as the idea that I think the left, sadly, that's a general criticism of the left I have, sadly focuses too much on morality and ethics and all that kind of stuff, which are, in my view, extremely subjective and frankly largely bullshit. Like, torture is bad or the human rights, or I don't really personally like. It sounds awful, but I mean, you have to really define them and be clear about them, and then I say, I agree or I don't agree, right? So I think that's part of the debate was far bigger than the fact that, torture is extremely unreliable. And it has been proven, like even CIA internal studies or the military's internal studies has proven that torture, information gathered under torture has not helped to catch anybody or anything. And the idea that, for example, they needed to torture people to find bin Laden in Pakistan when Pakistani security services are funded by the US since its inception, like it's idiotic. The whole thing, like you have to be extremely naive to believe that there are, we need people who, half of CIA are basically, majority of CIA are involved in drug trade. And they regularly torture people for money, probably. So the idea that there are these people who are put in this tough position. Shall torture, So, but left likes to talk about this type of stuff. Left a lot of times talks about morality, humans, the innocence, and
But I mean, one last word on the torture thing is also that the waterboarding was just, of course, then everything came out about the Abu Ghraib prison and the photos and everything that was going on there. That was significantly worse, probably. But okay, what else is there with Hitchens?
So we're done with this segment that was included some of my rants. This was I tried to hide my rant in the middle of our video so it doesn't come across as too badly. But I think at the end I thought we'd talk about some of his debates and feuds and his outputs, his works and outputs about him. And then at the end, a very brief thing about his legacy.